Book Wizards Book Club. Don't worry, we'll continue. Amy K from South Branch will have the next book for Halloween. That's going to be super fun. But for this month, we've been reading through the I Survived book, The Attacks of September 11th in 2001. And like I've encouraged you guys every single week to talk to your parents, talk to your neighbors about their experience in 9/11. Everyone knows what they were doing. Everyone remembers exactly where they were and what was happening on that day. I definitely remember what I was doing. 2001 seems like a long time ago. It really wasn't that long ago. But in this book, we have learned that the main character's name is Lucas, and he lives in New York City. He loves football, all things football, he loves it. He's 11 years old. But one day during practice, he gets a concussion. And so he's out for 2 weeks. And then before he goes back to practice, his mom takes him to a special doctor. And the doctor encourages Lucas, so really he tells Lucas that he should not play football anymore. Because in the past 2 years, Lucas has gotten 3 concussions. So obviously Lucas is upset. He doesn't want to listen to the doctor. He wants to continue playing football. It's his favorite sport in the world. Both Lucas's dad and his uncle work for the New York City Fire Department. And so because Lucas is so upset with his parents for them not letting him continue playing football, he decides to skip school on September 11th. And go into the city to find his uncle who is working at the fire station and try to convince his uncle to convince his parents to let him play football. But while he and his uncle are talking, they look up and they see a plane flying crazy low, and it crashes into one of the Twin Towers, which is part of the World Trade Center. And if you ask your parents more about it, they can tell you all about the Twin Towers. There's North Tower and the South Tower. Together made up the World Trade Center, and they were 2 of the tallest towers in the world. And they were 2 of the landmarks for this country as well. And so it was between a little after 8 o'clock and a little after 9 o'clock when 2 planes crashed into both the towers. And you can see on the cover of this book the billowing smoke and the explosions that happened in the buildings. And we are going to read what continues on. So let's finish this book with chapters 11 and 12. Oh, and also we ended with one of the towers falling down. So at this point, at the end of chapter 10, we learned that one of the towers officially crashed. And both the towers were over 100 stories tall. And so if you imagine over 100 stories crashing down in the middle of New York City. So, chapter 11. It was Dad's voice that broke the silence. "Lucas!" Dad shouted. "Dad!" Lucas rasped, spitting dust from his mouth. "Is anyone hurt?" Dad called. People coughed and hacked and sniffed, but nobody seemed to be badly hurt. Dust was everywhere. It coated Lucas every inch of him. It was in his nose, between his teeth, stuck to his tongue and to the back of his throat. It wasn't like regular dust. Some of the grains were jagged, bits of ground glass. When Lucas tried to brush himself off, the dust cut into his skin. "I have a light," Dad said in a calm, quiet voice. "I'm going to turn it on. Follow the light and come to me. We're going to stay together. We're going to be all right." There was a click, and then the glow of a small yellow circle. It looked like a moon on a foggy night. The air was filled with white floating dust. To Lucas, it seemed like they were trapped inside a snow globe. There were 4 other people in the store with him and Dad, 2 women and 2 men. The younger of the men came up behind the counter of the store. He worked there. Dad asked everyone their names. "I want everyone to put a piece of clothing in front of your mouth," he told them. "It's not good to breathe this dust." Lee, the store worker, got big bottles of water for everyone and rolls of paper towels. Everyone rinsed their mouths. Dad soaked a paper towel and carefully washed Lucas's eyes and face, and then he helped the others. Catherine, the younger of the 2 women, was crying. The other people comforted her. "What was that?" Catherine sobbed. "Was there another plane? Someone said there was another plane." "No," Dad said, "there was not another plane. I think the top part of the building must have come down." The door was stuck. Dad kicked out the jagged glass that clung to the door frame. He stepped out first, then turned to help everyone through out of the store. Dad had told them he wanted to move quickly. The 4 strangers started walking, holding hands. But Dad stopped just outside the store. His hand clamped to Lucas's shoulder, staring at the scene of destruction all around them. It seemed to be much worse south of them, where even through a fog of dust, Lucas could see that twisted steel beams and big chunks of concrete filled the streets. Cars were on fire, fire trucks and ambulances were smashed, a few weak sirens squawked. It sounded like the trucks were crying for help. All around them, people climbed out of the windows and doorways. Everyone was coated with white dust. Lucas thought of a book he'd read on World War II last year. There were pictures of cities that had been bombed and burned to the ground. That's what this scene reminded him of. War. Dad was looking intently south, like he was searching for something. It's gone, he said in a soft voice that only Lucas could hear. What's gone? Lucas said. One of the towers, Dad said. The entire building collapsed. Nothing around them looked like the wreckage of a collapsed 110-story building. Where were the big hunks of glass and steel, the smashed office furniture, the computers, the miles of wires and pipes? Where is it? Lucas said. There was nothing but dust. It's all around us, Dad said. The dust, Lucas realized. That was the tower. It was practically all that was left. Lucas tried not to think about how many people might still be in the buildings. The men and women working there, the hundreds of firefighters and police and paramedics who were on the scene, Georgie and Mark, Uncle Benny. Lucas tried not to think about the people who might have been in that building when it came down. Dad would have known. If he hadn't come looking for Lucas in the firehouse, Dad would have been. If he hadn't come looking for Lucas in the firehouse. Dad took Lucas's hand and held it tight. We need to move fast, he said. The other tower, Lucas realized. If the first one could fall, the second one could too. So they began their march north, Dad and Lucas together. The dust cleared as they reached Chambers Street. All of a sudden, the world was bright again. But it didn't matter, Lucas realized. It didn't matter how far they walked or how much time went by. Nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 12, Sunday, November 4th, 2001, 2:15 p.m. The air was crisp and chilly. Lucas stood at the edge of the field. The sounds of football filled the air, the cheers of the crowd, the trill of the ref's whistle. The laughs of little kids playing tag in front of the snack bar. Mom and Dad were up in the bleachers. They waved at him. He waved back. A player ran off the field for a drink of water. Hey, Lucas, he said. It was James, one of Mark's twins. Lucas had finally learned to tell them apart. Hey, buddy, Lucas said. Great game. The little boy smiled up through his face mask. Lucas held out his hand to high-five and give the kid a good whack. James ran back out on the field. Lucas turned, hoping James didn't see the tears in his eyes. He just needed a few seconds to pull himself together. He was getting better at it. And besides, he'd known this would be a tough day. This was the first game since Mark's funeral. The stands were filled with Ladder 177 guys and their families, all cheering for Mark's boys. Lucas was helping out the new coach. Some guys kept calling to Lucas from the stands. Half the Jaguars had come too. Lucas wasn't on the team anymore, but he hadn't lost football, or the guys. He took a deep breath. Yes, this would be a tough day, but a good one. Dad had told Lucas it would get easier as time passed. He didn't mean easy. It meant that there would be minutes like these when he wasn't buried by sadness, when he wasn't stuck in the terror of that day in September, when he didn't think about the planes of the thousands of people who died in the towers or the faces of the men who planned the attacks. The worst memories were from after he and Dad had escaped the dust, when they finally made it to the firehouse. Each hour had brought a new horror. The second tower collapsing, news that a plane had crashed into the Pentagon outside Washington, D.C., and that another plane had been heading for the Capitol or the White House but had crashed in Pennsylvania. There was that moment when they found out about Mark and Georgie, then Chief. The other men had made it back one by one, covered in dust and ash, some dripping with blood. That afternoon, there was only one man missing, Uncle Benny. The guys had seen him running into Tower 1, determined to get to the burning floors, to get as many people out as he could. Lucas could see the doom in the eyes of the other men as they talked about Uncle Benny. But he sat on the floor of the firehouse, his eyes glued to the door, waiting, praying. Dad had been right there with him. That was one good thing that had come out that day, Lucas and Dad. They marched out of the dust, holding hands, and just kept marching together. Last week, Dad even brought the Seagrave model up from the basement. The real rig was wrecked. But so Dad figured that they should finish this one and bring it to the firehouse. They worked on it some nights when neither of them could sleep. Sometimes Mom would sit with them. All they had to do now was paint it. The score was tied in the fourth quarter. The other team called a timeout. The kids all ran to the sidelines, surrounding their coach. He stood there with his cane, his left arm in a sling, his shamrock tattoo peeping out from the top of his cast. Uncle Benny. "We have some champions here," he boomed, turning to wink at Lucas. Yes, Uncle Benny had made it out. He'd come down the stairs of the North Tower a minute before it collapsed, carrying a wounded man on his back. He got himself and the man under engine truck and saved both of their lives. He was in bad shape when he crawled out. Shattered ankle, busted arm, collapsed lung. He was rushed to the hospital. Word didn't reach Firehouse until early in the evening. That is one memory that Lucas kept in his heart, the memory he heard that Uncle Benny was safe. Lucas walked over as the kids ran back onto the field. Uncle Benny had dropped his cane, so he leaned on Lucas. They stood and watched the kids play. Their quarterback took the ball and then hurled it. It was a terrible pass, impossible to catch, but James took off after it. The crowd stood and cheered, and Uncle Benny and Lucas laughed as they watched James go, go, go. Mark's little boy ran with all his might, his legs pumping, his arms reaching up, his face turned fearlessly toward the bright blue sky. The end. So, a lot happened on the days on 9/11, and once again, I encourage you guys to talk to your parents. Yes, both towers did collapse, and you can find videos of it on YouTube, but I want to encourage you guys to not watch the videos alone. Make sure you watch them with an adult who can help explain some things that were happening. Everyone has the stories to share and all that, but I hope you've enjoyed our book for Book Wizards this month. Make sure you come back next week for Miss Amy, who has a fun story to read for our Halloween, October. Oh, the whole month is Halloween. It's gonna be really fun. But hopefully you join us. I'll see you guys later. Bye.